A couple things I want you to pay attention to throughout this DVD and just playing this music in general is the space. The space of the music is very important. It's there for a reason. It's there for a feeling. It's there for the spirit. It's not there for the drummer to play fills all over the place because there's room for it. One of the misconceptions is that reggae is simple because you're just playing the same beat over and over again. That's not even true in itself. We'll get to that. But in general, I just want you to pay attention to keeping the mood and the feel dancey, heavy, and respect the music. The other thing I want to bring to your attention is touch. When I talk about things feeling heavy, that doesn't mean you have to hit hard to achieve that heaviness. There's guys with really light touches, but you hear them and they're locking in and it just feels like the heaviest thing in the world because it's not a physical thing. It's not from what's happening. This is some Jedi stuff. This is like from within. You develop that essence and it just also relates to jazz, where the more you get into it, the more you understand it and respect the music, your feel's going to start to get deeper. Getting the right sound out of your setup can really help your feel and approach to whatever style you're playing. In this segment, I want to talk about how you can achieve an authentic sound with your gear and your touch. One of the techniques you'll see all over this DVD is the cross stick. A lot of players don't even realize how many tones you can get out of it. You'll also see that the backbeat of the cross stick is the foundation of the ska beat. Here's some examples of different cross stick tones.
See right here? I used to have a corn here. It used to bleed.
Like a callus, yeah.
But it stopped bleeding now and get used to it. So it's right here this the beat come from.
Right.
Now you drop it so but you let go the stick. You don't go like that. You let go the stick and it drop right here.
Okay.
So you feel it, this finger feel it.
For the earlier styles from the 60s, you can achieve that traditional sound by using more of a vintage jazz type setup, or tune your toms and snare tight so they can ring. That type of tuning sounds like this. For the bass drum, I have a nice open boomy sound. I want it to feel and sound more like a cannon than more of a tight thud, like you're going to hear from the reggae sound. Now that you see how the kit sounds, I want to talk about touch and where I'm hitting the drums. I'm not approaching it by just hitting the drums dead center. With these styles, I really like to hit at the edge towards the rim to get that ring and that rim shot sound out of the snare and the toms. So I want to show you where I'm doing that. As opposed to the next piece of the kit I want to talk about, which is key, that you're going to see all through the video of different variations on how I'm playing the hi-hat, whether I'm using it with the foot and where I'm hitting it on the actual surface of the cymbal. With ska and rocksteady and even reggae, I'm playing everywhere on the hi-hat, not just the top, but the bell, or playing the edge. You get more of a body, more of a fuller, thicker sound by playing the edge. I use this a lot more for the rocksteady feels. The range of drum sounds in the different styles of reggae is pretty wide. From dead, beat-up sounding drums to crisp, clean, polished, acoustic kits or electronic drums. Even drum machines were highly used in some of the subgenres of reggae. To get the most common reggae sound, there's pretty much two options. Both options, the toms are usually dead. That's very common in reggae. With the space of the music and the vibe of it, you don't really want to have drums that ring all day. So you want to deaden up and tighten the toms. And the two snare variations are either a really fat snare that sounds like a gunshot, or one that rings, that people are used to hearing on Bob Marley records. Carly had that sound where he cranked his snare so tight people thought it was a timbale. The first I want to talk about are your toms. Start with this, duct tape. You can just tape up the heads till they ring a little, or just till they're completely dead. I also have some Remo O-rings on here. Another common tool is a towel or a t-shirt that a lot of the classic recordings have actually had those over the drums, over the snare or the toms. I still have this drum cranked, but I have a ring on it which is muffling the snare, and it sounds like this. So if I'm playing more like the DJ style and I don't want the snare to ring, I'll usually do that. So a good example of that beat would be this. The other option with the snare drum is taking the ring off and bringing the ring back in, which sounds like this. This is really common in the roots reggae sound, like I said about Carly and Horsemouth and Santa and Lloyd in the early days. They all had a wide open snare sound and just cranked. I have this head, pretty tight, and that really helps you achieve the different tones and rings. Cymbals in reggae. You'll notice that I don't have a ride. The ride cymbal doesn't really have a place in reggae, especially if you're trying to really stay authentic to the sound of it, so I don't use one. I use two small crashes for fast decay. I even use broken cymbals a lot of the time. Right now I'm using a 15 and a 16-inch crash, and my hi-hats are standard 14-inch. One of the things that Sly and Carly and a lot of guys used to do in the early recordings is put a towel or a t-shirt or even a real thin chamois inside the hi-hat cymbals to get a softer attack and a softer tone out of it. Sly also tapes his sticks, his lead hi-hat stick, he'll tape it just like crazy. Not because he doesn't have any other pairs of sticks and they're broken, but because he's doing that deliberately to achieve a sound. So it's pretty endless on what you can try to come up with to make your sound unique and how you want to cater to the music.
I heard the music in Jamaica playing this kind of boogie woogie. Umcha, 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 feel so good. Da, 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 da.
Yeah.
Umcha, 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 umcha. So I said, wait, it sounds alright, but I want to change this beat, man. So I leave from Montego Bay, went to Kingston, and circled by Coxsone and Duke Reid. And I was in the studio, and Coxsone put on a record and said, change the beat, lady. And I used to play with a band by the name of Eric Dean's band. He plays a lot of Latin tunes, bolero, cha-cha-cha, begin, every kind of Latin, samba, merengue.
Right.
So I put all those together and come in with the ska beat, second and fourth.
Yes.
So from the second and fourth beat, I put in all those things into it. Burro, because I used to go by Count Azzy,
Yep.
and play the burro drum on Sunday nights.
Yes.
So I put all those things into the ska music. That's why I get that kind of second and fourth beat going.
It's
And then after playing that way, Duke would say, Lloydie, the people them getting a little older, so you can cut down the beat. So I cut it down to rock steady.
rock steady.
It's a slow beat, but it's the same second and fourth beat. And him say again, after doing that, him say, Lloydie, get a little slow.
Yeah.
That turn into reggae. The difference is the speed. The ska is a faster thing than the rock steady. And the reggae is slower than the rock steady.
Okay.
That time, when the ska days, Toots and the Maytals, Ken Bood, Delroy Wilson, Alton Ellis, Hortense Ellis, Bob Marley. Bob Marley was the first guy in Toots and the Maytals, Alton, and everybody hear this beat and want to sing
Of course.
to the beat. So a lot of vocalists I went through. I was the only man playing at every studio.
Wow.
Duke Reed, Coxon, Beverly's, Randy's, Pottinger. You name the studio. I was the only guy that playing
Wow.
that kind of music, that kind of drums. And everybody love it. Well, I'm going to tell you something now. It depends on how the soloist is soloing. I can't say ting 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 ting.
Yes.
Depends on the soloist.
Okay. Okay.
If the soloist not playing certain thing, it don't match with what he playing. So you have to be playing a certain kind of staccato thing, then I bring in that.
You ride
and
it.
a slight touch of the burro, and a slight touch of the merengue,
Yes.
and a slight touch of the bolero. When I go to Japan, the drummer say, Lloyd, I want you to teach me the burro. And I show him. I say, well, listen now, to play the burro, you have to concentrate on the bass drum and the funde.
Yes.
Because the bass comes so boom, buff, open, close, boom, buff, boom, buff, boom, buff, and the funde play tuk up,
Yep.
tuk up, and the repeater play tekeng tiki tiki tang tang takang kang katang takang katukutung pam 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 pam.
Yes.
So now you have to concentrate on the funde and the bass drum to play the burro.
I'm here with Adrian Young, friend of mine from the band No Doubt, whose music is highly influenced by all of the styles we're talking about in this DVD. It's really cool to be here and have Adrian talk to us about these styles and how they've influenced him and the band. This is also special for me because a while ago when I was here with Adrian, this is actually where I had the idea to do this DVD. So thank you so much. It's great to have you involved.
Thank you.
And want to start by asking you about your influences, No Doubt's influences. You guys are by far one of the most successful bands in the world that has the ska and reggae foundation. Can you tell me about your influence as a drummer and as just collectively as the
Yeah,
band?
for sure. You know, when we were kids, the British two-tone movement was really what made us want to be in a band.
Yeah.
You know, bands like Madness, the Selector, the Specials, the Beat. It was paramount for us. It was just like, whoa, and we felt like, wow, it's this cool semi-underground. It wasn't that popular in the States, or at least in California. We thought we had our own little
Right.
niche.
That was your music.
And you know, we thought we were cool as shit, right? Because we liked ska music, and then you know, then later in the '80s, you know, Fishbone and the Untouchables came up through California, and they were also a really big influence on us. And you know, and Fish's drumming, first and foremost, was, you know, between him and probably Stuart Copeland were the biggest influence on me for drumming.
Earlier, you also were talking about Grizzly from Steel Pulse. He put
you know, as far as you know, besides the obvious Marley records, you know, I found Steel Pulse to be really interesting because the early Steel Pulse records, Grizzly was playing kick drum on 3, and then later he switched and put the snare drum on 3 for the Earth Crisis record, I think, which came out in the early '80s, and that groove and that style of playing reggae was just perfect.
And that's crucial of what we were talking to back in the reggae lessons, the difference between the earlier Steel Pulse Adrian was just talking about with the one-drop feel, whereas the Earth Crisis record, there's a lot of the rockers grooves, which is where you're putting the snare on beat 3, that backbeat, and bass drums hitting on 1.
In fact, I saw those dudes in LA, and I lost my virginity that night after the concert.
You got to record in Jamaica with Sly and Robbie.
Yeah.
And you guys got to play with all sorts of different Jamaican artists. What was that like for you?
It was awesome. I mean, those guys obviously are worldly talented in reggae music, and you know, we had probably a lot to learn because, you know, we played a lot, kind of a Orange County version of reggae for a lot of years, and you know, going down to Jamaica and really just taking lessons more or less from guys that have been through it so many times was cool. And the thing about Sly is, you know, he wanted to, he kept fiddling with this Akai drum machine, and he wanted me to play with it. So we did that, and you know, and then he kind of liked that I was, as he explained it, that I was playing reggae with attitude, you know, and I don't think that's obviously that's not traditional way of doing it, and he liked that, and so he kind of let me do my thing.
Cool.
And then when we got with Steely and Clevie in Jamaica to produce 2 other songs, they were a little bit more rigid. They're saying, hey, you got to simplify, you got to simplify, you got to simplify. But I was like, no, let's spend a little more time on this, and let me show you, because some of these little things, I know how they work with the vocals. You know, it's not just lay down a basic beat and then put everything else on top. At least for No Doubt, it's not. And then, you know, we came to a compromise, and it was good. You know, they pulled me back, but then I was able to still put personality into the songs.
Right.
And they ended up digging it.
That's great.
And, you know, working with both sets of producers was, you know, a dream for most of us in the band, and it was a good lesson overall.
Were those tracks you did with them more like roots reggae or dancehall tracks?
They were dancehall grooves.
Yeah, okay, so I figured.
So, yeah, they were dancehall grooves, and, you know, like you're saying, dancehall grooves are usually super straightforward, and you know, it was good for me to pull back a little bit, but in the end, I think it was good that, you know, it still sounds like No Doubt.
Right. How have these styles helped your drumming?
I think it's made me a much more well-rounded player, because I'm more or less self-taught. You know, I learned to read a little bit years later, but and I've taken a couple lessons, but predominantly I'm self-taught, and a lot of it's from listening to records. And so I think that playing to reggae and ska has made me way better than I would have been if I just learned how to play straight ahead rock. You know, I would have been much more limited.